is, if we're in the middle of it and you need more water, we can take a break.
Yeah.
Not a problem. This is, it's not an issue.
Okay, you just take breaks.
Are you guys good?
Yeah.
Ready?
Yeah.
All right.
Are
So
you each working on a camera?
yeah,
Yeah.
well, she's
I just
listening
sit
to.
here.
This one gets to stay still, and then this one moves a little bit. So,
Okay,
so
so you
we-
just take notes?
I just make sure the sound is good and
Yeah.
ask questions when I'm curious about things.
Right. But I was gonna say, my little cheat sheet is over there of all the things when I lead into my father. I'm
Well,
like,
if you want Travis to grab it for you, you can grab
Yeah.
it. For you.
Yeah.
Cool. Is it the?
it's that thing with the white paper with the,
Right there.
This
Right.
is-
Yeah. That.
Okay, I'll put it
just so
over
that,
here.
yeah,
and
so
if you
that
need it,
I,
you can grab it.
right, don't put that out of my
Put the
reach.
water. All right.
Yeah.
I'm honestly just gonna do these because I'm picking it up on the second. Okay.
Yeah, whatever you need to move, please, feel free to move. Yeah.
Let's see what's that. Let's get started. I can't believe how old the house is.
Yeah.
That's impressive. All right. You good?
Yeah.
All right. So if you could start by telling us your name, where you're from, and a little bit about your childhood.
Okay, well, I'll give you my full name and then tell you how it transposed. When I was born, I was called Jean Nadine Holsapple. So when in my baby book it says baby Jean, but Jeanne. And then for some reason it changed and it no longer baby Jean, it became Nadine. So that's where I stayed with Nadine, because my father's Procius Holsapple. Middle names. My mother uses her middle name, which is interesting. We all have a habit of using our middle names. Charlotte, Adele Holsapple. So, and I grew up here, born in Hudson, of course, but I've lived here all my life. Went off to college, came back here, and when I married, I moved a mile and a half away to the Rumke homestead. And then I came right back here and have been here ever since.
Can you tell me a little bit about your family, your parents?
All right. My mother was raised down in Cheviot. Grew up right near the river, right near the railroads. Her grandfather was a fisherman on the river Harmon. His name was John Sopa. And so then her mother was Mary Imogene Sopa, and they had a store in Hudson for a while when she married her mother. And then when he died, when she was only 9 years old, which was sad, her mother went to New York City and was a seamstress down there in the factories down there. And uniquely, she became the seamstress for Charles Lindbergh's children, which is amazing. I remember her talking about having to make clothes for them. So she was really raised by her grandparents, which were the fishermen on the river. And then she graduated from the little one-room schools. She went to Hudson, hopped on the trains. What they did, they hopped on the train and went and finished schooling up in Hudson. My father was born in this house, and he also went to the one-room school, which is right across the meadow here. And when he had to go to high school, he hopped on his bike and rode down to the same train. But she hopped on one place and he hopped on another place, because he went straight down Main Street and got on. The train would stop and pick them up, and that's where they went to high school, up in Hudson. So that was their way of living. Then, because this was a farm, his father, Charles Edgar Hover, was a farmer. And he then went on to RPI. And I think he was the first one from our family that actually went on to college. He was the only one in his family. She was the only one, so they were only children, each one of them. What else can I say? I have to stop and think. Probably.
No, let's see. Is there a story that you remember from your childhood that really encapsulates who your father was to you or to the family?
Let me think a minute about that, what he was. All right, he was always being an engineer. I know when, this is stories from my sister and brother, because we're big age difference. They were born in early 1900s and I came along a lot later. they were in their 40s when I was born. And he was always busy. So actually, I think I really would, what you call, had a surrogate father. This is different. My sister married when I was young, and they lived here in Germantown, down on Woods Road. And her husband was also an RPI graduate. And he sort of became my surrogate father. I did things with them as a child. In fact, they lived here when they first got married. And I can remember doing things like ice boating on the river with them, because my father was older at that point. He'd be in his 50s, where they were young and vigorous. And I can remember, this is crazy, but we won't do that today. They would, in snowstorms, they would drive the car, and we would be behind it on our skis, and they would pull us down the road on the skis. And I can remember the hay wagons coming in, and I can see the tongs coming in, because it was a farm, and I can see that come down and lifting the hay into the hay mow, because I would climb in that hay mow and slide all over. I was, I guess, a tomboy. And I'm trying to think what else. I have to think a moment. Give me a moment here to stop to recall some of the things, because I mentioned the ice boating thing. Because we would ice skate on the river with sheets, and when they knew where this was a safe place to go, and we'd have sheets, and the wind would carry us down on the river. But I did this again with my sister Helene and her husband Howard Disbrow.
What is your family lineage from on your father or your mother's side? Where do they come
I'll
from?
give you my mother first. We didn't know it, but my mother's family went back as far as the Mayflower. And we only discovered it when somebody died without any records or any wills or what have you, and then the lawyers told us what the lineage was, that we came from John and Priscilla Alden. And also, as we watched the lineage, it came down from the captain, Francis Cook. So we saw that as it came down, you will see them merged down where they came together. So I think their lineage is older than my father's lineage, because my father's lineage was from Christian Haber, it was called, became Haber, and then it was changed to Hover, and they were the Palatines and came in 1710. And from what I'm told, the family that left Europe, there were a family of a mother and father and 5 children. But they, when they were listed on the list down here, when they came through the immigration, there was only left the oldest boy, which was Christian Haber, a younger sister, and then a real young sister. Christian Haber settled here. And then the younger sister somehow went to Albany. We lost track and have no idea. And their youngest sister, we understand, was put into as sort of an indentured person to some family who wanted her. So we have no idea what happened to her. But she wasn't brought here to the to the Palatines because she was too young to be able to live through the harsh times. Water. You can hear my voice going crackly. I'm going to run out of water soon.
We can get you some more, no problem.
Okay, where was I?
You were talking about the youngest daughter who wasn't able to live through the times, and then the other one went to Albany, lost track.
Well, there were many, Christian Haber married, and of course there were many, many descendants. And we came down many lineages. I'm trying to think if I'm the 9th generation. I've forgotten what it is. 9th grand, and of course 9th, Karis must be the 10th. 11th would be the next generation, I believe. So we have lived in this community since then. Many members have lived since then. And this particular family has lived in here since 1860s in this house, which was built about 1860, by Aveline Phillips, she was a Hover, Aveline Hover Phillips. And when she died in 1884, it was given back to Alexander W. and his wife, and then given to my grandparents as a wedding present in 1885. So it's been with us, a smaller version. We're right now sitting in the oldest part of the house. And my father was born in this home in 1886. And I think they lost a child, but he was an only child, as was my mother. They were both only children. Then my father graduated, I think I'm calling it, didn't I?
It's okay.
Did I talked about his one-room school, did I already? Or did I?
Yeah, I touched
See, I
on
don't
it a
remember
little
what I
bit.
told you, what I spoke.
You know what? When we're all done with this, it's going to be kind of in bits and pieces.
Okay.
So don't worry if you
Don't
go
worry
over
about
the
it.
same thing. Not a problem.
Not a problem.
Yeah, whatever brings up memories
Yeah.
and
Can we get you some more
information.
water?
Yes, please.
Yeah,
I'm
grab me
going
some
through it.
Switch gears a little bit. Is there any? Are there any traditions or rituals that you remember in your childhood that might have dated back, to earlier generations, that or Christmases or holidays, things that happened that might have been influenced by the generations before, since this house has been in,
I'm trying to think, to stir these memories here about that. It goes back so far. Some people have beautiful memories from way back and can come out with it so clear, like Helen. Helen Henderson, oh my. Generations. I think, when I'm recalling, as I say, Howard Disbrow was my surrogate father and did the young things with me. And so that he brought that in. He came from Yonkers, New York, and so once you bring in another family, you have different traditions kind of carrying and mixing through. And one tradition I'm remembering, because now it's coming close to Memorial Day, we went out and picked our iris and what have you, and we had big white baskets. It was carried on, and we took baskets of flowers and took them down to all the grave sites. So I remember taking them down to the Cheviot on my mother's side, and always down to where the stone is down here on the Cemetery Hill, Reformed Church Cemetery. So that was a tradition. We always had to go out and cut, but you didn't go to the florist. You always went to what you had in the garden, and mostly we had grew our own iris, lilacs. Oh, it was always lilacs. It was lilac time. So that was a tradition I remember in that sense. I can't remember other traditions other than going to visit. We always went, my mother and I always went to the different families taking presents. My grandmother, who lived in Cheviot until they finally came out here. And but we had many, this is what's bringing up for me, we had many generations under this roof. My grandmother, Minnie Alice Miller Hover, died in about 1923. Up to that point, my father had been traveling all over as a civil engineer. He worked in New York City, and thank goodness I have the resume to run by. So my sister was born in Wisconsin. My brother was born here in Hudson. They lived in Hudson. They lived all over until grandmother Minnie died, and then they all came back here. And then it was my mother and my father and my sister and Alec. They all then lived here. But by the time I was getting very old, they were off to college, so I really kind of grew up alone. They were all gone, off to college, Syracuse, and then to Texas. And that gradually, as my grandparents grew older, my grandmother, who lived till 99, this is Mary Imogene Salpa Hutchings, we in-moved my grandmother, in-moved my great aunt, who was never married. She lived in Cheviot. She had played the organ down in that church down there. So it's my mother, my father, and then I got married and came home with my husband and brought Karis here. And then so his mother and father, my grandmother, my great aunt, My 3 girls and my brother. He hadn't married yet. So we were an extended family,
All under this roof.
all under this roof,
Wow.
all under this roof. So there was many generations that lived right here. My brother worked in Albany, and he stayed here until he married in 1967. And then when he married, he moved to Albany. And the next year, my father died. So then we were just down to a basic family, but it never has been a small family because we had student exchange students here. We've had foster children here. So I'm bringing you up now, kind of what's happened. And so it's always, this is the first, this house has been just me. It's always been many, many generations under one roof. People have moved in and out. Dia's lived with me at times, Karis has lived with me at times. So this is where we are now. And this will become Karis's in due time. So it's going to stay in the same family all the way through. So, all right, where do we go next?
Let's see. The
Just if you don't mind, before we move on, what was that like raising a child with so many generations inside a house?
Many people to entertain.
Yeah.
It was marvelous. And I could go off and do things, and there were grandparents here and great-grandparents here, which was wonderful. So that we had so many of us here.
Are there any stories that you remember specifically of funny things that happened? It's just such a unique situation to have so many generations, different styles of parenting.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Is there any specific thing that stands out?
Let me think what stands out. It was nice, you always had a babysitter under the roof. You didn't have to hire a babysitter, which, but that's generations ago. You didn't have babysitters. I didn't have to have one ever. Because there was always somebody here. And even when my mother died in 1861, interesting, her mother died the year before, and then my mother died. And my father, I was here to take care of him. So there's a caring, you didn't have to worry about a nursing home or anything. Because everybody took care of everybody. So when my grandmother and my great aunt couldn't live by themselves down there in Cheviot, they were taken under our roof. It's interesting. And another interesting, now you're stirring up memories. When my grandfather died my grandmother died in 1923. My grandfather remarried maybe 3 or 4 years later. He married into the Lasher family. This is a real connection. The Lasher family, Florence Lasher, sister to Pauline Lasher Engelkirk. You're watching the connections here. Son Harry Engelkirk. Harry Engelkirk, who marries Sally Phelan when her husband dies. And I thought, oh my, just through relationships. And now here I'm on the GSEF with Joe Phelan. And so the families, they're all so connected here, amazingly connected, which is, but coming back to where under the same roof, we took care of each other. So they took care of them till they died, and I was here to help my mother take care of my grandmother. I was here to help her take care of the great aunt. And then I was here when my mother was sick, and then I was here to take care of my father. So he babysat when I was still teaching. He babysat my children when I wanted to go out. Henry and I wanted to go out. Oh, this is a funny story. And now you're bringing back memories. Henry and I would go out. And the master bedroom, which is new, that was his bedroom then. And the girls were supposed to go to bed at a certain time. Well, they would sneak into his room and sit around with him on the chair and watch television. And they'd see the lights come down the lane. And they said, oh, time to go to bed. So they'd run, sneak off to bed.
It's funny.
So that was the kind of relationship. It was marvelous to have. That's the many generations, which is, it's wonderful to have had that.
Now, you said your dad was a civil engineer,
Right.
and in a time where I'm guessing the town of Germantown was kind of in a state of building, and things were getting built, and they needed new people to
Right.
do what he was doing.
Right.
Was he integral in any of the building and the ramping up
yes.
of the town?
He traveled all over and helped, I think the Priest River Dam out west, he traveled and traveled and traveled. This is why my sister was born in Wisconsin. And so he worked on the railroad building. He was the draftsman for building the railroad. He worked and helped under Standard Oil in New York City, part of that construction group as an engineer when they went down underneath. So he's done a lot of constructions across the United States in various places. And then he came back when his mother died so we could be with the father. And he then, the little schoolroom house had come back to our family. I have the deed somewhere. And he made that into his lumber company. So he became then, he could construct. And he constructed in Germantown, I think he did the, what was known as the now Otto's Market, but it was Tracy Rockefeller's. And trying to think what else. He built the cold storage. Yeah, I think I have a picture of it in here. One of the cold storages, so he was part of that. I have maps of what he did in surveying all around here, of all the many different places he did. He built what was known as the Adventist home over here in Livingston. For me, it is now called Livingston Hills. And at that point, it's interesting how everything is related. It was then called a TB sanatorium, way back then. And in 1941, my brother Alexander, who had been working in New Jersey, contracted TB. So how amazing how this works. He wound up living there for a year and a half in the building that my father had built. And it was, he liked it there. It was great friends, but of course coming out in World War, that's why he didn't get into World War II, because of the illness. My father then went on to become county superintendent of highways for Columbia County. I was trying to think what else, because he was instrumental in a lot of the buildings and surveyings around here. I'm trying to think what else. Gotta think a minute.
The things I have are a little bit switching off of that, but if anything ever comes up from something that we had talked about earlier, feel free to jump back. Since this, you and your family have been in this town for such a long time, can you talk about how world issues, say, the wars or the assassination of JFK, any of that influenced the town? How did that? What was the feeling in this town? I feel like a small town snapshot is a good representation of how the nation feels, but maybe what was different or what was the feeling here?
Trying to recall. This is interesting. My father, this I think is a Republican town, and he was not a Republican. And I don't remember. The only thing that comes up for me was politicians seem to rule some of the jobs selections. And as a county superintendent, he had to be very careful about, today's, well, have you received something or whatever as a gift as a person in that kind of a position. And I just know he didn't talk politics. He didn't want to talk politics, apparently. He was just too involved with dealing with his everyday stuff from all the towns, because I know he worked with building bridges and roads in this whole community. So politics was not a big subject in my family. They just kind of didn't talk about it. Maybe because he was not of the major political party. I don't know.
What was the town like during the Vietnam draft and that era?
Well, I got to go back then. You
Yeah.
bring up a visit from Eleanor Roosevelt. When I remember the Anchorage, which is now a park, I guess. I remember going to plays there. And I remember when Eleanor Roosevelt stopped, and it was a big to-do when she visited our little tiny community. which brings me more stuff about her. I remember as a young girl, the family beyond me here was called the Halls. She would ride through on her horse, Eleanor Roosevelt did, and would cross over the stream here, apparently. Valley Hall was, I think, lived over there, so that was my recollection of, on the political side of somebody very famous coming through. But I can only tell you that was told to me. As a child, I didn't pay attention to that, but that was about it.
Wow.
So, but I do remember her speaking, Eleanor Roosevelt speaking down, coming in, and that was a play. Did you realize that was a theater, was performed there with New York City artists coming up from the city? Because I attended them, it was called the Half Moon Anchorage. And when the trains came through, everybody would freeze, and they're speaking, and then when the train had gone through and blowing its whistle, then they would continue with their play.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that day that that Eleanor Roosevelt spoke down there? For someone who wasn't there,
Yeah.
what was it like? What
I
did it look
just remember
like?
the crowds. I must have been just too young. Let's see, you're back into the 40s, and I was going to say high school. I was into high school. I was into those kind of things, and you don't always pick up or just remember. I just remember crowds being there, and that's just a feeling of excitement that she is landing at our little community. But that's about all I remember of it.
Wow. That's
It's just being a kid, And kids don't pick up on all those things. They just remember the excitement of the crowd. And that was about it.
So, do you have anything?
I guess I'm interested, this is a little bit different, off a little different topic, but your family has been here forever. Was your husband's family also?
A mile and a half away.
Okay,
And they lived in a Hover house also.
wow.
A house built by Moses Hover. Though he's not on our family, I don't see him on the family tree here, but he must be of the lineage. We came down to Moses Hover and the Mitches. Do you remember Melvin Mitch?
I don't.
Melvin Mitch, and then it was a son, Melvin Mitch, and then they had 2 daughters, I guess. And they live where is on Route 9G, where you turn into Northern Boulevard, the northern entrance. There was a big house back in there on the right, on the left. And so that's all I remember. It's just what's been told to me. Sometimes you wish you'd paid more attention than you did to what was happening, and who was where and what was going on. I can tell you places by, well, so-and-so lived in this one. This was where Mr. Dick lived, or this is where somebody else lived. The corner's always the Tappan House. And no matter who's been lived in it since, that's the way we refer to places around the community as, that was that house, that was that house. So, any more questions?
Yeah, before we move in to kind of look at all
Yeah.
the genealogy and
Yeah.
everything, there's a couple questions that we've been asking each
Right.
person. So we're going to go into this, just a few. The first one, what do you think has changed the most about Germantown over the years that you've lived here?
There's a couple of things. Climatically it's changed. I have seen the change in our water table. As I say, what I can grow agriculturally here. Before, what we did grow as a farm, you can't grow. There were pears. There was a pear orchard across that whole thing there. There were apples. There was all kinds of fruit. This was all a fruit farm and dairy. I remember we had cows in the barn, and we made our own butter. We made our own cheese. We had chickens. Chicken every Sunday. My father would chop the head off the chicken, and I remember ducking the chicken into hot water and plucking it, and I had to learn how to clean the chicken. So we lived off the farm. During the war years, my mother had a beautiful, great big garden, which was that whole lawn out there. We canned tomatoes. We did a lot of canning and preserving. We had a food cellar down below where we put everything. So we lived off the farm. And what's happened now, we can't do that as well. It's a struggle. I can't grow even hay out here. So I see climatically a change is changing there. On the other level, I see more people coming into this small community. I see more artists. I see how rich this is. People think there's a little community, there's nothing here. Oh, let me tell you. There's so much art center here. There's music culture here. We may be a small school, but I say, are we so rich with what is being offered to this little community? It's amazing. And there is so much you can do, most anything you want here on a cultural level. And I'm sorry that sometimes there is resentment about people coming in. You know, the newbies versus the oldies, ridiculous. They enriched it, and they've come in more and more, and they're taking our old homes and refurbishing them. That is wonderful. I'm seeing that happen, like the old Hover House at where Hover Avenue meets Dales Bridge, that beautiful big brick house. I'm seeing the house owned by Conrad Hansen right now that has been, upgraded and made so beautiful. So I'm seeing much of that happening, which is wonderful. I'm looking at what's happening down to the little town of Cheviot, where my mother grew up, and the homes and the people who are coming in and just making it wonderful and refurbishing it. And they're bringing so much in. They're bringing in skills and arts that people, it's a sleepy town, but boy, is there so much in it. There's drama here. You don't have to go very far to find all of that. The theater and everything. And I started to bring back memories. I'm thinking now of this little community and all the plays we put on here. I remember being part of it, of the plays that the school would put on. We had drama clubs, and from all the different people. And I was up in the attic and I found the books. I played this part and I played that part, and going way back. So I guess that's been part of me from school, from elementary school all the way straight through college and back into the community. And so I've looked at what's happened musically as well. I even forgot some of the things I've done and how I got involved in music. Because when I started off to go to school at Cornell, that was what I was going to be. But I wound up going into education, which was just as good anyway. But coming back into the community, being a part of the community, I'm thinking of now the group that Donna Deal with the community chorus. Well, I didn't realize it, but I sort of did that myself back in, and I've got pictures of people who are long gone, from Larry Bullitt on, and many people who are no longer alive who were in this group. I had about 16 group that I called the Joe Ray Medes. As a community group, we participated with the school. We went to the nursing homes and sang, and this is what Donna Deal does. So I thought we have still this richness in this little community, which is wonderful. So there's so much here. If people would only really open their eyes and see and accept the new coming in as well as the tradition.
Well, that's wonderfully said. Absolutely beautifully said. On the other hand, what has stayed the same?
What has stayed the same?
What do you feel is the constant in Germantown?
Constant is to keep this, what shall I say, there's a nice word for it, that's Beethoven's, the Pastoral Symphony. Makes me think of it because I just came from a wonderful concert at Bard College, but it was Brahms. And it is a pastoral kind of a community. We tried to keep it the same. You want to have new things, but there's a peacefulness here. The beauty of seeing the Catskill Mountains and trying to keep the water pure. And so I still feel the peacefulness of this community. That's one thing I would say stayed the same, would continue. We're growing, but that is what draws people, I think. They like it when they come here. And keeping its ruralness as much as we can. That's a feeling. That becomes a feeling that is people search for. You don't find it in the big cities, really. It's the outdoors, and we have a lot to offer in that respect from all the stuff that's around here, our Taconic Park and what have you. So that's probably the thing I'd say. And the interesting thing is, the families that have stayed and stayed and stayed, so there's a sameness there. They don't seem to move away. Families that have moved away come back. I think of my one daughter back here. Youngest daughter in North Carolina will probably eventually come back here. So I guess that's probably the thing that probably is most in my mind.
What does Germantown mean to you?
It's a haven. It's, I'd love to go elsewhere, but to come back, I guess maybe it's my own setting. It's a peaceful setting. There are many friends, and I love making new friends, so it's being rooted here and yet welcoming. I love to welcome other people who have come from other places. I'm thinking of the new friends that I've made who are newbies, and it's a rooted place. So to me, it's my roots. It's a peaceful place. It's a retreat, and yet I can go out and pick up and learn and learn and learn, but I can always come back and be grounded. So it's a grounding place. It's a rooted place. It's a peaceful place. So in spite of chaos, no matter where it is in the world, you can always come back and find a peaceful place.
Is there anything, any ideals or morals or anything in that realm that you would hope to pass on to the future generations that either live in this house or live in Germantown? Anything that you would wish to, if you could offer them, what would it be?
I'm trying to think what some of my favorite sayings would be. Diversity is important, and sameness is important, but you need both. If you have everything the same, it can get boring. You need diversity, and sometimes conflict looks like diversity, but on the other side of conflict, there's always learning to be had. And sometimes conflict will make you strong. So if you can look beyond the conflict and see what is out there beyond and not judge. And I love the saying from the Indians, our natives, we are all immigrants. You haven't walked in your brother's moccasins, and until you have, don't judge. You can't judge. You don't know what they've experienced. You don't know what they have felt and what their pains and traumas are. Don't judge. Accept people where they are. And don't throw, have you thrown a stone at somebody? And so why throw stones? It's better to let people be as they are and say, well, that's who they are. There's a favorite saying I've said to many people: what you think of me is none of my business. Because it's coming from you. So, judge them. Whether they're newcomers, or they've been here a long time and they're set in their ways, or they come in with new ways.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. I'm excited we'll kind of move everything over. We'll lay some stuff out. I want everyone to be able to see your amazing work that you've done on those. So
that we thank Amanda for. Memoranda for.
Yeah. Well, you're both. It's pretty great. So perfect. Sarah will grab the mic, and then we'll kind of.